October. The agenda was posted in advance of the meeting as required. I would like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the members of the committee who are present this evening, which include Tom Whalen, Brian Rader, Cindy Van Conant, Raul Blanchet, Tony Stanese, and Matt McGuire. And I'd like to thank Kelly Seeley, RBA, for her attendance this evening. If you could all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, take a moment to pull up the agenda. I'll ask at this time if there are any agenda adjustments for this evening. Seeing none, I'll appoint Cindy as our process observer for tonight and move right into the approval of minutes for the September meeting. So I'll take a motion to approve the September minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
From Raul, seconded by Tom. Any questions, comments, changes? Seeing none.
I love the way she writes those meeting minutes.
Oh, she does a great job.
Yeah.
Including the attachments and everything. Yeah, she's really fantastic, and so thank her very much for her time and attention. She keeps shares of all the meetings in order and provides an outline of motions and things like that for us before every meeting, so we know kind of how to work through things and how things need to be worded, and it's extraordinarily helpful. So, seeing no other comments or adjustments to the minutes, I'll take the vote. All those in favor of the September minutes as written? Unanimous. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no public this evening, we'll skip right over public input. Moving on to monthly results. Kelly reminded me late this afternoon, as I directed everyone's attention to the co-op board package, I realized there were some results in there for their last meeting. And Kelly was quick to remind me that those were the same results we had seen at the end of September. So I don't know if anyone has any questions as a result, but those were, it's the same set. It maybe had a slightly later date, but the data was the same for what we had seen in September. So we can, the end of the year unreserved fund balance remained the same, and I think we were at an unreserved fund balance for the view that was presented of like $40,000 for the year at this point.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
So we can jump right into the fantastic part of the evening for our focus and attention on the FY22 budget overview. First, want to extend my apologies to the Budget Committee for sending out a few very late files today. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, I realized something needed to be added to the file I had previously sent you, and then promptly needed to revise the file I sent out. So my apologies if you didn't get to look at it before this meeting. They weren't necessarily really substantial changes, and there are things we can talk through. So if it was something you didn't get to open, that's fine. It'll be easily addressed and explained. But I typically don't like to hand out files and give out files that late because people are very busy and don't often have an opportunity to view them before the meeting. But the one additional file I sent was the enrollment report that I had just received from the superintendent this week. So that I did not have at the time I had initially sent the file. So we can spend a few minutes on that as well. And work through the budget view that we have in our preliminary guidance discussion surrounding that budget. October is typically the month we provide preliminary guidance, which is like a direction to the business office. In past history, we found kind of not providing guidance. This was many years ago. Not providing it was really not a helpful exercise for the business office. And if we really wait until the end of November, we're starting to get really late in the process for guiding, offering guidance and directionally impacting the budget. So that's why October is really an optimal month for providing that information. It will be preliminary guidance based on information we receive through the process. We might decide to refine guidance in November, but at least we've given a starting point to a process that's well underway within the district. So at this point, we can maybe talk at a high level through some of the budget that you've presented, and then that'll give everybody a sense of the priorities and initiatives that the district's looking at for the year, and then we can kind of go back through the guidance calculations in the spreadsheet and talk through our process and how we want to issue guidance for the year.
Okay. And I just want to start, especially for Tom and Tony, with how we do the process internally.
That would be great.
Yeah, we start on the FY23 budget in July, and we bring the principals of both schools in. They bring what their, quote, wish lists are, and we tell them to bring the kitchen sink. So we can provide that for you in round one. And I think this is part of the budget file that Darlene has sent to you, the new item spreadsheet. That's kind of our Bible for what's new for the year. So round one is what we do in July and August, and then the school, the teachers and other administrators will add to that round one by the end of September 30th. And then Andy and I go through what comes from round 1.3 in this case, and we make some cuts that we know just probably won't make it through the process. So we make that first initial cut, and that's what you're seeing today based on all of the feedback from July through now. And it's not to say that we won't be adding other things or subtracting other things. Obviously, to get to guidance, we will subtract, I'm sure. And but that's how we go through the process internally. So as far as, I mean, please stop me if you have any questions, because I know we have new people here, but.
So anyone with a laptop, this information that Kelly's going to go through is on the new items round 2.0 tab. So it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th sheet into the document, the spreadsheet.
Right, and I won't go through every line on here, so if you have a question, please stop me. And we break this up into, certain sections, which makes it easier for all of us to digest and ask questions and review and reflect. So the personnel box that you see there, and we have the separated by middle school and high school, we're proposing anyway to move several of our part-time positions to full-time. And so you see that there. Right now, those positions are full-time this year, and they're being funded by ESSER funds. So now we want to propose keeping them full-time and using our budget monies, because ESSER funds will stop at some point, unfortunately.
So those are just the high school?
Yes, just the high school has those particular, that particular situation. And then the school board, and Cindy can speak to this later if she'd like, is requesting the addition of a social worker, and that's in response to all that our students have been through for the past couple of years with COVID and the effects of that.
Can I ask how some of those issues are being addressed this year? Are we utilizing the staff we have, or contracting services to help, like with local agencies to support
Yes,
students?
and part of this moving to 1.0, like the guidance, there's a guidance move that we've moved to 1.0, so that is part of what's going on. Yes.
Is there any specification to that position?
Is there any specification?
Yeah, for example, any abstract that describes the details, the
Not at this
responsibilities?
time. I
Okay.
believe the school board has directed.
We requested that as well at the school board meeting, to
Okay.
have kind of a job description and what their position would entail.
Right, so that's coming.
Okay.
We're also, this year we have hired an additional tech specialist, and that is being funded mostly this year by ESSER funds, and we'd like to fund it 50-50 next year. And so that person is already with us. Then we also have students that are requiring us to move paras to the NEC program, which is a specialized program for some of our students, and that is reflected in extra days because they don't work the same schedule that a normal para works. We also have some stipend increases that you see there, and then in the section you'll see both in high school and middle school called shared positions. We have been for several years now. I think we started with 4 positions. We've hired those 2, and now we've got 2 left that we hope to get into the system, and one is a food service sub, and one is a just a regular classroom sub, but it's like a guaranteed sub. So it's not, they don't pick certain openings. They would just come in every day like a regular employee, and those positions are not only shared between the high school and the middle school, but they're shared between all of the schools in the district, yeah.
I assume you're going through each category.
Yes.
When you're done describing the details, can you then summarize and saying this is a total, for example, in this case, 5 new positions at a total cost of X amount?
Sure.
That way, it will make it into the meeting minutes, and the audience will have an understanding of what each one of these categories is about, because not everyone has that access to it.
Okay, I think, you know what, I think we can do is add the new items sheet to the minutes.
Okay.
As opposed, I mean, the budget trend sheet and the superintendent's sheet are extremely lengthy. They're updated consistently and continually. But I think the new items
Sure.
piece is a good one, that spreadsheet, to add to the minutes. So we'll make
And
sure
we put that spreadsheet on the website as well.
Okay.
Right, because the superintendent's view and this new items view is included in the board packets now,
Yes.
going forward monthly.
Right.
And those are published to the
Okay.
website as well.
Right. So to Raul's point, the category of personnel, which includes, well, it's not any one whole position, but there's several positions there. So that one category itself is totaling $246,000 of new items. So then I'll switch over to academics, and again, please interrupt me if you have any questions. The high school is asking for 2 separate textbooks in algebra and a world history. We have several requests for online resources. If COVID did anything, it helped us identify that we can use more online resources with our students very effectively. So those needs continue to increase. And then we have several other academic needs that you'll see there. The most costly one in the list is upgrading our Adobe software, and that affects a couple of different classes at the high school. Some interesting ones are the sewing machine tables in the fax room and the mannequins for the health department. As far as the middle school goes, they have a few requests for the library for foreign language novels, and they have a request for chairs. We want to make sure our tech equipment that we invested in is regularly inspected, so it's about that time, so we're going to include that in the budget on a regular basis if we can. And that pretty much sums up the big items for under the heading of academics, and that section totals $61,398 for the 2 schools. We don't have a lot of new computer equipment requests. The one that has made it through so far are to to purchase monitors for this room.
Quick question.
Yes.
That previous category, what's
Yes.
SST scooters?
That's for the PE department. They're scooters that are very low-lying. You sit on them and you use your legs to move around, and they do various athletic PE kind of things with those.
Okay.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So under the heading of new computer equipment, which totals $600, is to purchase 4 monitors for this library, the bigger size monitors. Under replacement computer equipment, we have our annual staff laptop request. There's 10 in each school. We have projectors requested for both schools. We need a copier in this building, and we had to purchase an emergency copier as well, so that would be the second year of that copier. The Red Cat audio systems are aging out, and we need to start replacing them, so the middle school and the high school are both going to receive some of those. There's a $5,000 purchase here for an interactive flat panel for the computer science room, and that's part of a renovation that we're doing. You'll see a little bit more about that down below. But all of those replacement computer-related requests total $45,000, almost $46,000.
So these were not items that were part of the phased replacement cycle?
No. We have actually met all of those requirements based on what we were able to get with various different
Right.
funds.
Okay.
So we are pretty much,
So we're not skipping a year?
We're
and
not
anticipating
skipping
a year.
anything.
Okay.
We were able to use
great.
other funding sources to fulfill
Awesome.
that plan.
Okay, great.
Good question. So down to shared services and software, and this is kind of one of those categories in which we're trying to show the co-op's portion of purchases that all 3 districts will participate in. We would like to purchase a truck and trailer to be used by our athletic department and our facilities department. That will be shared with the other 2 districts as well, but as you can imagine, the co-op has got the brunt of that cost. We also, now that we have so many new devices coming into our buildings, excuse me, we have a storage container right now that we're renting for IT equipment, and we'd like to purchase one because it's definitely a lower cost, and that way we can store all of the obsolete equipment that we normally have been storing in the building but have no room now because we have all these other devices that will be taking place.
Why do you store obsolete equipment?
Where?
Why?
Why? Because on an annual basis, we send it in a truck to go away. But we
Okay.
need to store it somewhere
So it's
until then.
accumulating and then.
Yes, it
dissipates
accumulates.
and then-
And we'll be taking it from all 3 districts. So
Okay.
that's the point, because all of the districts are experiencing that same problem with storage.
All right.
We have moved our accounting software to the cloud for the purpose of cybersecurity and increased cybersecurity presence. So this is the co-op's portion of that, that increased cost. This is our last phase for maximizing our HR software. And lastly is an increase in IT consultation services. As you heard tonight, Rich is retiring, so we want to make sure we have that appropriate service consultant out there to help the new Rich. And we have a new IT director, Carol Tyler, has taken that role on. So we want to make sure those 2 people are well supported by consultants.
Is this position included as part of the maximum of 8 that you're allowed to, that the school, the high school?
He's talking about the contracted
Yeah,
retirement.
contract retirement.
Oh, no,
He's-
because Rich is an
he's leaving.
SAU employee.
Oh,
He's
okay.
not in the
All right.
union, so it doesn't,
Thank you.
he is not affected by that. Okay, so under the heading of shared services and software for a total of $53,650, and the amount is the same for both schools, we can put that 50/50. Oh, I lied, I'm sorry, the truck was a little bit different because we know the high school will be using that a little bit more. Okay, under the heading of safety issues, all 6 schools, we are trying to get bollards for them. Those are, those big, made of very many different substances, concrete or planters or some sort of thing as a protection in front of front doors. The Homeland Security keeps recommending this very highly, so we are trying to do that this year for all 6 schools. And then the high school needs some rekeying, both interior and exterior. So under the heading of safety, for a total of $13,000. Athletics, only the high school is represented here. The middle school seems to be in good order. It is time for them to replace the wrestling mats, and this will be the last request for volleyball poles. All of the others have been replaced. Under the heading of facilities and maintenance, we are exploring the 3rd plus potential phase of paving at the high school. Right now, we've narrowed that down to 2 things. One of them has been moved to the maintenance trust, and another is here. It's under dirt lot, but that might change because a suggestion was made, I believe it was in the school board meeting, to explore the paving the section next to the turf field that we did not do when we did the turf field, and Cindy can probably talk more about that as well. So we may switch it to that. I think we need to find out what the cost will be before we know if that's a viable option. And then next, under the heading of energy lease possibilities, I headed it that way because we are exploring, I think we've mentioned this in previous meetings, exploring updating some of our HVAC systems and LED lighting and, potentially solar panels, that kind of thing. Also looking at increasing and reorganizing the space inside to accommodate increased enrollment as it may be coming down to the high school and the middle school. So that's why that heading is there, because if the school board decides not to pursue that sort of energy update, then these are the things that we will need to do for sure. And we have HVAC upgrades in the high school. We also have some in the middle school, but that has been moved to the maintenance trust.
So, with regard to the energy lease, I now recall we were pursuing like an enrollment study and the energy studies. Are we anticipating results from those shortly?
We're hoping that they will have something to present to us. I may not work for November, but probably most definitely December meeting.
Okay.
I know they're working on it right now. Okay, and then under just other facility needs, because there are a lot of different requests, there is a roof section that's going in, but that's been moved to the maintenance trust, which we'll discuss in a moment. We also need a storage container to store the tables and chairs that we have at the high school. We want to start door phase 1 for interior and exterior repairs and replacements as needed. The fax room needs new kitchen countertops. The laminate is starting to come up.
So just going back to the doors, how many phases are you anticipating?
I'm not entirely sure about that one. Many more for interior, but
Okay.
I think the exterior is maybe only 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then the computer science, we're trying to put air conditioning in both the engineering, that's this year, and the computer science next year, because the devices stay in that room and need the cooling that the air conditioning can provide. And our usual window, screens, blinds, and seals. And boiler jacket replacements is a new one this year. And we're trying to do gym inspections in all 6, well, not all 6 schools need them, but of those that have bleachers, we will try to do that in all 6 schools. And then for the middle school, under that heading of energy lease possibilities, we've got phase 3 of the window replacement, which I believe will complete it, but we'll have to make sure with the quote that we get. They are looking to do some interior lighting replacement in the MPR and exterior lighting and move to LED for that. So those things need to be done if we can't include them in an energy lease that the school board may approve. Then that computer room renovation that I mentioned, they have built-in units that are not really conducive to what the computer science program is all about. So the idea is to pretty much gut that room, new flooring, and new electrical, and then that's where our interactive flat panel can move into, because right now the electricity is not adequate enough to do really anything. And under other facility needs, the last phase of the MPR table replacement, we want to pave that driveway that I'm sure you've noticed has giant potholes in coming into this building. And there's one classroom that's been identified for flooring replacement, the tile at the base of the library, and that gym inspection as well, and a diesel pump maintenance program we are trying to develop. So all of those facility needs total $212,750. And all of our new items total $649,800 right now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the next page, which is warrant articles, because those have yet to really be discussed. The SAU assessment that you see there is very much an estimate at this moment. We need to finalize that. And once that budget is finalized, I can finalize that number. And then, as I said, I mentioned the maintenance trust. A few things are going in there. We do have, this is dependent on an influx to the maintenance trust of $200,000. So if that changes, we would have to change what we're putting in. But right now we have paving from 122 to the part that there's a section that we started just by Jeff Love Lane. So that section from the road to the new piece there is what we're talking about with that amount of money. The roof section I mentioned, that is section 1, but it's the 7th phase in 10 phases. And lastly is the middle school HVAC upgrades that we'll need to do as well.
The total for that section?
Is, well, it's what I'm doing there is taking the 99,625,
Yep.
adding 200,000, subtracting
Oh,
200,000.
I see.
So you're
Yep, I
you're
have
left
it.
with a
Yep,
balance.
yep,
It's
yep,
more of a
yep.
balance than a
Yep,
total.
I have it now. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Questions?
So that was the kitchen sink and everything else?
Well, a little less than the kitchen sink.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Some things have already been cut.
Yeah.
So,
My understanding, right, that the second round is less than half of the first round?
yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
didn't
so
even
the
look at it
first,
that
the
way.
first round totaled
Oh, yeah.
almost 1.4 million, and this is coming in at, the requests now are coming in at 650,000.
Couple sinks are out then.
Hmm?
Couple sinks are
Yeah,
gone.
just a couple.
Yeah. So,
I had a question.
Sure.
Kind of a basic question. When you're adding personnel, do you look at the ratio of teachers to students and see how that changes with the additional personnel? Is there some number that you're trying to hit to keep a certain ratio in place so you always have, a good student
Right.
teacher?
There's a couple of different factors. If we're talking classroom teachers, yes, class size, as Cindy can tell you, is a requirement of the school board, and they look at that on an annual basis. So that can help determine whether we add personnel. Special ed is a determinant as well, because there are students that come into the district that have special needs that we may not have staff on board right there, or we need to add additional staff. Like in the case of the paras, we're having to add hours to the current paras to meet the needs of the students. So there's, and then there's other needs, like if we have an influx of technology, that's why we are picking to add a technology specialist. So it would depend on what kind of personnel you're talking about, but class size is definitely a big one.
one of the things I pointed out also when, including the link to the school board package, there was an overview of the class sizes for the current year for both the middle school and the high school, with some, additional commentary, like I think AP French wasn't run last year, but it's being run this year. And, a few other comments about collapsing classes. So if one, I don't know if it was drawing or guitar or something like that, if it looked like it was a small class, it runs at the same time as like a lower level, like a drawing 1 and 2 or guitar 1 and 2 or something like that. And I don't know if those were specific examples, but you'll see some of those comments that run through that document.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. I'm sure we will think of questions and
I hope so.
and have some, follow-up commentary on all of that later. Just quickly running through some of the other sheets in the budget itself, you'll notice a superintendent's view, which is a account item run of the entire budget with some history. So this is the view that's included in board packets and is updated, round to round, and it gives a nice summary at the bottom of how the operating budget versus the additional warrant articles will fall out. So Kelly, based on the two studies, the enrollment and the energy study, we are probably anticipating there could be a recommendation for some type of energy lease of some
That's a
kind.
possibility. The school board may decide they want to wait until next FY24 because we're,
Yeah.
also up against Brookline, who is probably more sure about doing something in FY23. So
I
I don't
see.
think they want to compete.
Right, and
So-
Hollis is already,
Hollis is set for this
Yeah.
year, as far as I know, although they may resurrect the barn bond.
Right.
I'm not sure yet.
okay. So that's a nice, very complete summary. One thing I wanted to just point out, Kelly and I traded an email on this. One thing that needs to be added to this summary view is the HESA contract.
Yes.
That was not a San Bernard's agreement last year. The HEA contract was a 3-year contract that was, all 3 years were approved. We called that being San Bernard's. They were approved in one fell swoop at last year's annual meeting. HESA comes in year over year, and that's about an $80,000 contract. So when I should have, with all the adjustments that I made, I should have included that. But oh, actually, it's 88,000. I think last year was 81, and this year, last year's approved amount was 81. Next year's amount to go into the warrant will be around the $88,000 range. So that would drop the operating budget from the 25,589 to 25,501, which is a 4.1% increase from the current budget. And then that HESA contract amount moves kind of to that open line and is listed ahead of contingency, trust, maintenance, and things like that. The grand total does not change. It's just a reallocation from the taking money out of the operating budget and moving it to a warrant article because the contract needs to be approved.
It may change a little.
Well, it may
because-
change, yeah. But for right now, the placeholder that we're
yeah.
using is that, because that's an amount we had previously seen.
Right.
So Kelly's going to go back and rework out that
Right,
with the next view.
certainly, yeah.
So this superintendent's view rolls up into the budget trend view and really is, it just summarizes the information in different categories that as a budget committee, we've historically looked at them in a different way. So it kind of reorders all of the information that was on that superintendent's view. So you'll notice a lot of the 800 lines collapse into an alphabetized listing of certain areas. Once you open them, you can see all the different descriptions, the percentage variances. The history on the file goes back to, I think, 2007 actuals. There are a couple of years where we have some reference issues, like in 2014, we dropped a page out of the sheet or something like that, but I can always dig out a 2014 view. But our focus is kind of more on the current past, and we include, we overlay a 5-year trend and a 3-year trend column to that. All of that information, again, it rolls up in a way that we had previously looked at it, and as a budget committee, I mean, at some point, we might want to decide as a budget committee if that's the format we want to continue working in. I know, Tom, you work in Google Sheets. Do we still want to keep this as an Excel file, and things like that? Those are all bigger conversations to have, not at this time of year, because it's not a great time to make, big substantive changes to kind of the formats of the documents we've been using. So we can, delve into, specific line items and things like that. But I would like to kind of move ahead a little bit to the guidance multiplier sheet and then the preliminary guidance sheet. So I'm kind of working backwards through the file. So the guidance multiplier calculation is something that we use to kind of help us set preliminary guidance. And it allows us to kind of look at our starting point for where we are with the FY22 budget, take out some items that we kind of separately address and consider increases and decreases to outside of a CPI adjustment. We come to a baseline guidance amount and apply a multiplier and determine a multiplier to apply against that base. So we've done this in a few different ways in the past. The starting point is typically CPI, which is the latest view that I have is, that I sent out today is 4%. So anyone with a laptop, if you want to update your 4%, your 4.3 to 4%, that was information I actually pulled today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The link is identified to the right. And it's a little bit lower than, I think that was the September view. The previous view I was using was July, so it was nice to see it go down a little bit. One of the things we've discussed as a budget committee was whether that multiplier really should be applied against that entire guidance base, because there are certain elements of the budget, specifically salaries, that are addressed by CBAs. And so sometimes those CBA adjustments are greater than inflation, and if we apply a factor to that amount of the budget, we're kind of, in a way, like we're calculating an amount into guidance that's already been evaluated. So in a way, we're adding more.
So for example, things that have already been standardized,
Right.
I mean, that's already been adjusted,
Right.
right? So therefore, items like that should be extracted.
Which is what, yes.
Right.
Right, so that's what we do. And then we come down to a new base, we look at what that is as a percent of the total budget. And in this case, the salary amounts are about 46% of the adjusted guidance base. So we took the FY22 budget, we removed transfers, contingency and trust funds, debt service, special education, the SAU budget allocation, and NHRS. Again, like especially for like the SAU budget allocation, that's something that's addressed completely independently of a CPI adjustment. NHRS, last year when we did the biennial rate change, we were looking at substantial increases to 21% and 14% for the bargaining units, which were, I don't even know, the percentage, those were the percents that we apply, but they were very significant, like over, I think, 25%. They were huge
Yeah,
increases.
yeah.
I'll have to go back and look
Yeah,
at
I
exactly
think you're right about that.
what they were, but they are in place for 2 years. So those are things that, again, they move and get adjusted outside of a CPI adjustment. For special education, we identify that separately and put a little bit more attention to it because it can fluctuate significantly in either direction. So it's something that we just pull out so that we can evaluate the impact to the budget and without applying the CPI factor. So those are the items that come out. We determine the percentage that contracted salaries are of that guidance base and the amount that's remaining. So the 54% is what the we would be taking 54% of the CPI of 4% and saying we're going to adjust the guidance base by 2.2%. So we're saying we're not going to adjust the base by 4%. We're going to remove that salary component and use 2.2% against that base, which would be a $342,000 adjustment. We add back in those amounts outside of guidance as they're projected in the new budget. So we see we have a new debt service line, we have a new amount for special education, NHRS, we have an approved HEA agreement, and we arrive at what, from a budget committee perspective, we would call the guidance warrant article operating budget. So that was the budget committee's guidance of what the warrant article for the operating budget would look like. So right now, if you have the latest version 3 updated, I think the changes that I made were the 4% to the inflation factor and adding in the Sanbornized HEA, which was the $294,054 that was excluded from a prior view. Okay. So cell B43 of 25,516,781 is what would compare to, I should include it right there,
25,560 what?
16.
516,781.
Okay. Sarah, thank you.
That's right, too. We can share.
And that, for comparison's sake, would equate to, on the superintendent's view, round 2, it would have been the 25,589, but we're taking out that kind of adjustment for HESA, and that revised operating budget amount is about 25,505. So for the first time in my tenure on the Budget Committee, we have a guidance view that is greater than the view that was brought forward from the business office, based on that information and the way it was calculated here.
Right.
That is not this, and this is the part now that's just kind of up for discussion to talk about how to proceed. This is just the standard way we've calculated it in the past. So, for example, last year, after working through the multiplier, we made a decision as a budget committee to include a multiplier of 0. And we did not increment the base, and we made some of those adjustments, after a discussion. And I'm hoping we have that discussion this evening, as well as a discussion of what the next column of information includes under column E. So this is in response to Raul's request to look at, instead of the FY22 budget as a baseline, to look at FY21 actuals as a baseline. So what I did here was take our FY21 actuals of 22,768, 778. I believe.
What are you looking at, darling? I'm sorry.
On the column
E.
E2,
E2.
under the calculated FY23.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then so where we ended FY21 from an actuals basis, if you recall, was significantly below the budget, due in large part to some expenses that were not incurred due to COVID and different transportation, special education services, professional development, staffing, a lot of different areas. And we can go back through those if we want to talk about those. But the other piece is, after we finished FY21, we started FY22, and we have an approved budget based on articles that we approved at the annual meeting. So the approved articles / adjustment line right below that 22.7 of about 2.2 million is for the approved HESA agreement, HEA agreement, the increase in NHRS because we have the substantial increase in the rate changes, the change in special education because of student needs, the change to the SAU budget allocation that didn't go away, it was just an additional amount as we went into this year. We had an amount that we added into for the CIP. We did not approve the contingency, so I reduced the adjustment by that amount because that contingency would have been in the FY21 actuals, and had an increase because we were moved about $100,000 as we moved into contracted transportation increases. So that resulted in an adjustment of just under $2.2 million. Next, I included a COVID adjustment to address expenses that we legitimately think we would incur in this year because we don't have the same effects of COVID as we had last year. So these included, salaries, transportation. We're moving students to their sporting events that we weren't doing before. Probably added back routes that we took out of transportation, and put back professional development because teachers are able to go to PD and conference, and our administration is able to go to conferences and things like that again. And that came to about $650,000. And from there, everything proceeds the same way it did in the other column. So what happens when you get to, assuming with the same assumption set, this view is lower than the other view by about, lower than the view that we've calculated by about $60,000, and lower than the superintendent's view by about $40,000. So those are kind of our two starting points for discussion and below that, we're adding back in anticipated additional warrant articles for the HEA contract. We won't have one this year because it was Sanbornized. The HESA contract, we will, so the amount in there is a placeholder. We no longer will carry an athletics expendable trust article because we've moved to a revolving fund, as was voted on at last year's meeting. We have the $200,000 that was referred to in the new items section for the maintenance trust, $25,000 addition for the special education expendable trust. This is something we typically put forward year over year until we get to about the $225,000 to $250,000 range. Last year we did not put this forward, but it's back for this FY23. The contingency right now is 0. We can have a discussion as a budget committee if we want to pursue that or not. That was voted out of the current budget, and we have a placeholder for the SAU budget assessment, which is the co-op's portion of the SAU budget.
Good question.
Yes.
That 4% multiplier is still 4% at that point, or is it 2%?
It's still it goes back down to 2%, so the
Okay.
amount that gets added, it's the same. We go through the adjustment
Okay, yes,
process and have the
2%,
multiplier.
okay, yeah.
And so the difference between the two amounts is like $1,000 or so.
So two different ways and come up with roughly the same answer. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
there is $60,000 difference
Yeah.
between the two views.
You know, in the past, I've enjoyed Andy coming back several times to get down to the last budget, so.
Oh, don't worry.
If we go with a higher amount,
No.
we won't need to do that.
We're gonna have a conversation.
So,
We're gonna have a conversation. So, again, so now I would just kind of, having gone through that, I'm happy to address questions, input on whether we think the adjusted view versus our normal method is a better way of doing things, input on the multiplier. I have a couple of ideas of a couple different things, but I'd like some feedback and some input on kind of how everybody feels about the calculations at this point and how we want to proceed.
It's a matter of, when you present everything that you've done, all of the options, all of the different trials with different numbers, so people on the other end understand that this was a very comprehensive review, and the numbers are all similar, whichever way you slice it. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of, should we add $46,000 in, should we take out $60,000? It's almost a moot point at that time. And you could pick any one of those numbers and you'd still be within the budget range of acceptable.
And so for the FY21 actuals though, how, I guess, normal would you consider that based upon what's happened over the last year or so? I think there could be some error there just because of things have been different the last 2 years.
Right, and that's
So-
why, kind of that COVID adjustment number is in there as an attempt to kind of
Yep.
bring a little bit more reality back to, not taking actuals and just voting in, adding in things we voted on. There, kind of to recognize that, and I'm not sure if 650 is the right amount. It might be higher, it might be lower. I mean, I took what I perceived as the most obvious things that we were going to still experience, as the co-op would still experience as a district, but.
I am very impressed by her analysis and attention to detail, and I view this as a confidence exercise. She approached it from two different ways, and the numbers came out about the same.
And
So
actually,
therefore,
it's
that
good to
should
see
give
that.
everyone who's paying attention confidence that what we're doing is about right. And so,
when I pulled the file last year, we did the same exercise.
Right.
The numbers were within about $100,000.
so I think we might want to institutionalize this process, if nothing else, to give confidence to the process. I mean, that's.
Yeah, because the wish list, that term in itself bothers me. It should be a needs list. The wish list makes it sound like you're grabbing at things, a wish. But the needs are, you're assessing the needs and coming out with a number. Just from a perception standpoint.
And then there are years we need to prioritize, and maybe there are
Yeah.
years that we don't need to necessarily,
Well, and I think that
as
was,
rigorously as we would.
so Kelly, can you talk a little bit about that needs, the wish versus
Oh,
needs? And kind of
absolutely.
your and Andy's process in evaluating that and having the administrators prioritize their needs and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say you're very right. They all are legitimate needs, but some may be more needy. That's a great way of putting it. So, you know, we get a sense in those July and August meetings from our administrators just how needy those needs are. And they're happy to say, you know, if I had to choose between this and this is what I want. So that's part of how we come to those cuts. And then, you know, I'll use paving for an example. It's we need to do all of that paving, but it's highly unlikely that anyone would expect that we would do it all. So we're trying to look at that, you know, what is going to give us the best bang for our buck. And that we apply that same methodology to a lot of that. But then if you're looking at personnel, I don't think we're ever frivolous about that, because those are always based on some sort of need, whether it's class size, whether it's special ed, whether it's, you know, an influx of technology. So I think these are all based on needs, but
I agree.
we have to
But just
try to
the
prioritize.
terminology, when people hear like,
Sure.
they're wishing for things, is it really needed? Well,
Right.
the answer to that, of
No,
course,
I
is
think
yes.
that's absolutely an important distinction that we need to stop
There's
using.
another point, this one year, I had the opportunity to go into the database and review what teachers were asking. I wasn't looking at capital improvement programs, I was looking at did a random look into what the English teacher was asking, what the math teacher was asking, and I was, every time they asked for something, there was a rationale or a basis for it. And I tried to look to see how legitimate or strong that was, and I was convinced that that was very legitimate. So I convinced myself that the process we have in place is consistent and is on a need base.
Yeah.
At least that section of the total, you know.
Right, right. And as I go through the budget lines, I'm looking at that as well, you know. If I just see a blob, I need X number of dollars, well, that's likely going to get cut. But if I have an explanation with that
Right.
dollar figure and it looks legitimate as a need and it's been researched and well thought out, then that's likely not going to get cut.
Right.
And I think, you know, we've been doing this new items process now for several years, and I think that we have trained our staff that's how you get what you need, is you make sure it's well thought out, it's documented, researched, whatever the need happens to be. And I think, for the most part, they get a lot of what they request. And I think we also have made a good effort of being transparent to the taxpayers as well, which is also very important to us.
Yeah. Thank you, appreciate that.
So at this point, I'm not sure if there's a preference over which view to use, but I would like to kind of have a conversation about the multiplier. You know, it's based on a significantly higher inflation level than we were at a year ago. And I don't know, a phrase that came up at another committee meeting was transitory inflation. Is it something that's, you know, we perceive as continuing or not? And is it something we want to carry forward into a budget that's another year out? So we can address the starting point of the multiplier, we can address the ending point of the multiplier, and so I would just kind of like some feedback on how people feel about that CPI adjustment in general.
As a general statement, I can tell you, my understanding and belief is that prices are sticky at the higher end. When they go up, they tend to stay up, and when they go down, there's a lot of pressure to bring them back up again at the first opportunity. Suppliers will raise price, but they won't lower price at the first opportunity. So we'll have to be vigilant to get those price decreases, but I don't anticipate those happening in 6 months' time from today.
I think there's more pressure for higher levels of inflation.
Okay.
The other thing is I would look at each one of the components you assumed behind that number and ask yourself, for example, energy for the transportation. How much is that going to go up? Unless we have a 5-year plan or contract that already takes that into account. But that's an example of a big item. energy is gonna go up perhaps much higher than 5%.
I think things are gonna get worse before they get better.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an example. Maybe we can look at all the factors you looked into the multiplier and analyze it on its own merit.
Yeah, my crystal ball is foggy, so,
It's not
You know,
straightforward.
That's crystal ball.
there's, yes. So, given that, I usually tend to go a little bit on the conservative side of things, but sounds like we're pretty much all in the same place anyway.
Okay. Kelly, can you, I think one of the areas where we might have realized savings is through the contract itself, because you used a census for last year to staff demographic to calculate the contract impact, contract cost on a staff that we don't currently have. So it's a different mix of the staff. So I'm not sure if we might have realized some savings there, because I'm quite honestly extraordinarily surprised that our budget number is coming in higher than yours.
I thought I read it wrong.
I know. You don't know.
I've never.
This is why I was up at 1 o'clock in the morning thinking, I don't think I did that right. Maybe I need to
I'm
do
gonna
this
wait until
again.
Darlene explains it, because I've
Yeah.
never seen this before.
Exactly.
Maybe we made a mistake.
No, so, there is the possibility that we realize some savings there,
Sure.
because we do
Yeah.
typically hire, we do have a staff population, and you'll share the census as we kind of get through this process, and you'll see that we have a master's-heavy longevity, higher longevity based staff population of teachers, and as we probably may not have had a lot of retirees, but just as staff rotates out, we have in past years realized significant savings just through attrition. And I know moving into this budget year, looking at FY23, you probably have the 8. Do we have the 8 retirees so far? Or?
I think we might be one shy.
Okay, so we
but
have 7.
we
according
They
to
were
the
coming,
minutes, we
they
have
were
7.
coming in early, so.
Yeah, our
Yeah, they're
retirement,
coming in early.
Yeah, I see that the
yeah,
retirement
the
amount is
retirement number
significantly higher.
is, what is it,
like 150.
154, and we didn't have any for FY22, and the previous year was 48,000, so
Right.
that gives you an idea of how
Yeah.
that's changed.
So we do see some, higher things on that
So if we're
aspect.
60,000 apart, we have 154 benefit from salaries alone.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because that's not affected by the multiplier, so.
right.
Yeah.
Right, and I can give you, a better idea of the savings that we incurred as well. And the personnel lines are something, and the benefit lines are something that I need to go through and review and
Right.
make sure they're accurate.
So what you're suggesting is how accurate is that 650, right? In other words, we're gonna take a look at all those items and see if they can make any savings?
I think that it is, in the range of, I think it's a reasonable amount. And I'm just, I know that there are improvements that can be made in the view that we have, which is good for everyone. So it's a better view that the district's putting forward, and it's a better view than what we would have calculated and anticipated. And I will say, this is a process we've been using for a really long time. It's the same process the Hollis the Hollis Budget Committee uses. So it's a very consistent way of approaching how we get to where we get to. And, we typically come in, I don't know, it's ranged from 100,000 to 300,000 below guidance, and we've worked to close that gap. Looking at items outside of guidance, something that if we saw a significant increase in GMR, but even the GMR is reasonable as we go forward in this budget, and things like that. So we've managed to work and kind of work toward closing those gaps. So I know there are improvements that can be made on that side, and again, I'm looking for some guidance on.
Did we get the GMR?
Yes, so the GMR, Kelly, is
3.9.
3.9%.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
So that's already included in the calculation of benefits in the file, which is significantly better than I think what they were originally estimating, which was in the 10% range,
Yeah.
right? And we have that early, I feel like that's earlier than we normally have.
It was about a week earlier,
Oh,
I
only a week,
think,
okay.
yeah.
So it's a very reasonable
Mhm.
increase
And
in
can you-
GMR as well.
Can you remind me where the transportation contract falls?
Thank you.
It is just awaiting signatures.
But as far as in
Oh,
this, do we
yes.
have anything already in this calculation with the
yes.
new contract?
Yep,
Okay,
the
that's what I
numbers that
thought,
you
but I
see in
wanted
here
to-
reflect the new contract.
Yeah,
yes.
the new contract was approved at the governing board a
Okay.
couple weeks ago.
Does it include an escalator on fuel usage?
No, because we do the fuel.
Okay,
But our number for fuel is pretty high already, so
Okay.
I think we're good.
okay. All right, well, let's do that. Okay, just for argument's sake, while we all agree that CPI is likely to be sticky and at a higher level, just for argument's sake, I would make a recommendation to cut the multiplier in half. That would give us a difference from the presented operating budget view of $155,000 and would put forward a target as the administration goes back and kind of tweaks their numbers and evaluates where they are with the budget.
So the target number would be
The
25.
25, 345, 525.
Say that one more
That-
time.
I'm sorry?
Say that one more time, please.
25, 345, 525.
Okay.
That would be
For the operating budget.
for the operating budget.
And the operating budget
Just one
wouldn't,
second.
oh, sorry.
Okay, so that would drop the total warrant, okay, I'll give you two numbers.
So you're gonna add the HESA contract, right?
Yep, if I add back the known contracts, I mean, known additional warrant articles, that would drop the total warrant to 26,732, 788, which is a 4.1% increase from the current total budget. And the 25, just want to make sure I give you the right increase here. Okay. And that would be a 3.4% increase on the operating budget, which I had already calculated at the bottom of the page, so I'm glad that that worked.
And what was the total percentage increase, including the other warrant articles?
From a budget committee perspective, it would be 4.8. From a school board submitted view, it's, I'm sorry, did I say 4.8? I meant 4.1. And from a superintendent's view, it would be a 4.8%. So that total view for the superintendent is 26,888,297. And the budget committee view would be 26,732, 788. So that's, superintendent's view is a 4.8% increase. Budget committee view is a 4.1% increase.
For all warrant articles?
For all warrant articles as they stand today. I
Yep.
can't address like an energy lease or things like that.
I have a question. When is the earliest we can start adding to the conversation that when you include the amount given back to the taxpayer?
Like the tax impacts?
Yes, therefore, this is not as bad as it may appear.
Right, so we can,
You-
tax rates have not been set yet.
Okay,
Revenue has not been estimated yet. So once we have the tax rate and see where we are, we didn't do reval as a town yet, right? Neither community did their
No.
revals. Okay, some communities have.
I mean, Brookline's just set their tax rate.
But yours is set?
Yes.
Oh, well,
Yours
okay,
is-
great.
Hollis
Is it
is
Monday?
right behind
It's,
it.
yeah, they're all coming like within
Yeah.
the next couple of days, but as of
Yep.
today, you know, we're still working on those. So,
you see what I'm getting at?
no, yes,
Basically, it's just a complete story.
I completely see what where you're going. And I think, once we have the tax rates, we can work on
Yeah.
like the analysis that explains, you know, because we gave back this is what happened
Right.
here. Because we gave back that, this is what happens here. And
That was actually kind of what I was asking, looking for when I was asked earlier about the forms that were submitted.
so Brian, what might actually help you is the Brookline sheet of the tax model that Tom Gian and I use.
Yes,
Because that that goes back
that
a
would be
long
very
time,
helpful. That
And it
would be very
breaks down
helpful.
the town, the co-op, and the
Yep.
school district
Yep.
amounts, and I'll get that to you.
Great, great, thank you.
Yeah, you may not need all that.
Yeah,
It's her
if-
spreadsheets.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same one, Tom and I we've been working on that together for a while.
Yeah, because I
and
was
it goes back to,
interested in
like,
the breakdown of like
2007.
the different revenues, the expenses,
Oh,
the.
sure.
Well, it doesn't have
and
the
all the
different,
returns.
it looks at revenue in total, it doesn't look at all the different components of it.
Yeah, I was
So-
also particularly concerned about changes in state aid, which were significant as far as
Yes.
Brookline is concerned.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, there's an
Um,
adequacy number, and you
yeah.
can get to, okay.
Yeah, and those numbers haven't come out yet, huh?
Adequacy is not out yet.
Okay.
There are some changes to the methodology, which I was going to talk about in November, because by then we'll have the adequacy numbers. And I can kind of send everyone a bunch of DOE links for the Department of Ed. They have a lot of really good information on adequacy aid in general, but for the co-op, you have to look at things a little bit differently. There's a different co-op piece because what's issued to Hollis and Brookline then gets divvied up between Hollis, Brookline, and the co-op. So there's a supplemental report for that. There's a lot, but there is a lot of good information just on the adequacy calculation itself and what the levels will be. And it does go back several years. So you would be able to go back and look at like Brookline in total and
Yep.
see like stabilization grants and things like that.
so one of the things that came out of the surprise was back in March when we were, doing, March meetings and such, we were anticipating having a town tax rate increase in like 10-11% range.
Yeah.
Actually came in barely over 2%. So that's an enormous difference, so
Well, part of
and
that
some
is-
of that is, it goes off to DRA, and DRA comes back with a magic number for us. I'd really like some insight into why there was such a huge delta.
Well, and part of that
Yeah.
was, we were predicting 200,000 back to the taxpayers,
Yep.
and we actually, it's 517,000, I think.
Yeah,
So that made a difference.
so those kinds of numbers, I'd look at and then plug in to see how much of that came from different sources.
Okay.
We can start with
Yes.
that model, at
Yep.
least. That'll give you a sense of it. And like I said, I'll pull some links to some different DOE spreadsheets. If you can manage your way through them, there is actually a lot of really good information on the website and some good explanations of how things are calculated. The cost per pupil is something that I reference putting together the annual presentation. And that, again, has historical information that's available and things like that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, Matt, do you have something to say? You looked like you were going to say something.
Just a second.
Okay, so, as I said, so when we were talking, getting back to guidance for a moment, we were talking about that, cutting that multiplier in half, and that would introduce a difference of about $155,000. So that would give us an opportunity to go in. I've already pointed out a couple of areas that kind of jumped out at me that I've shared with Kelly that she was already aware of and going to be looking at, but it enables both our committee and Kelly to go back and evaluate some of the components of the budget. So for some feedback on how people feel about that.
Is there any way to cut back the special ed budget?
To do what with it?
Cut it back? It seemed, when I went through the actual, one of the budget views, it seemed like that was a big ticket item.
Yeah,
for
I
this year.
don't, it's typically
always
not
is.
something that we touched.
And it's because,
Yeah.
I think you see it this increase this year because we have a cohort that just left the lower schools that came to the middle school.
Okay.
So, and I think that kind of ebbs and flows.
It does.
Sometimes it's
Most
a
definitely.
I
high
mean,
number and sometimes it's not.
We have no insight really into the details, so my question is someone looking at that and seeing
Absolutely,
where
our
they
special
can-
ed director is the one who personally did that budget.
Excellent.
And she has formulas for just about everything she does in that budget, and she's very well aware that it's not to be used as a slush fund.
No, I'm not suggesting
Well,
that at all.
I'm just saying that the awareness is there.
Yeah,
I do not believe for a minute that there's any dime that isn't well used in that budget.
okay.
If I understand, there's only two ways to handle the special needs, special ed, is that either we can provide the services here or have the students go to where the services are.
Yes, out of
And
district.
this, you gotta look at that from a cost standpoint.
Oh my
which
God,
I-
That's
it's
always so
gigantic.
significantly more when they're
Yes.
placed out of district. And what we've done over the years too, one of the, aside from the services that are offered, just the
Apply for
transportation of getting
subsidies,
right?
students
Yes.
there, which is why we shifted to using leasing vans and having vans available and transporting students even to kind of local areas where they do learn life skills and things like that.
Yes.
Instead of using school buses because it was so much more expensive to use them and things like that. So I would say from Amy Rowe, who is still with the district, Bob Thompson, and now Lauren DeGennaro, they've all been involved in, Amy and Lauren especially, in the programs at the high school to bring services in-house and address as needs as reasonable and appropriate in-house,
Absolutely.
maybe better than some of the other areas that students can be moved to.
Right.
So, and that's always in the interest of saving money for, obviously offering the best programs for the students, but they do end up saving the district money over the long
Yes,
run, so.
there's a long history of doing that, yes.
When Amy came, she did a lot of that.
Yes.
Helping to try to keep kids from having to be shipped out of the district.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great for them to be in the building and be with their cohorts.
Okay, so at this
I
point.
can make a motion to accept your proposal, right?
Okay. I always struggle with how to make this motion. Okay, so we're gonna, so Raul, are you making a motion to set preliminary operating budget guidance at $25,345,525 based on a adjusted guidance multiplier of 1.1%?
It's a 1.1% or?
It's now down to 1.1%,
Okay.
She took it in half.
yes.
She
I cut it in
halved
Oh,
half.
that's okay, right. The answer is yes.
Great. So you would say, so moved.
So moved.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Brian. Okay, great. So that's 25, 345, 525.
I'm just thinking of the person who's taking the meeting minutes.
She appreciates that you're thinking of her.
Yes.
She understands. I don't know how she does it.
I don't either.
Some of the
She was like,
conversations go on
Thank you
forever.
for
I'm not
sending me
sure.
the presentation, so I know what you're working.
She does a lot.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of setting preliminary warrant, preliminary co-op operating budget guidance at $25,345,545, please indicate. Oh my gosh, fantastic, it's unanimous. I love it. Great. So what we can expect to see with the next view is, some just additional clarification. One of the areas I asked Kelly to take a look at was FICA. The increase kind of jumped out a little bit, and I know she'll put some attention to that. I would encourage anyone over, the next, whenever if you're reviewing the budget, if anything jumps out at you and have any questions, please forward them to me. I'll consolidate them all and shoot them over to Kelly. She'll either, address them prior to the meeting or at least have some idea of where we're going and things that we are paying attention to and asking for clarification on. And some of the additional information we can expect to see in November will include the adequacy information, and I'll just go through my notes of some of the other, we can talk a little bit about enrollment tonight, but I didn't have a chance to really delve into, the Hollis-Brookline splits and things like that. But we did receive NESDEC information, and it'll be interesting to see how that information correlates to the enrollment study. Is the enrollment study supposed to be a little bit more long-term, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I think they might be doing 5 years.
That's
but-
Okay.
what rings a
Was
bell
it?
to me
Yeah,
as well,
okay.
5 years is what I was thinking.
Okay, so we'll kind of see how things line up. I was a little surprised to see that there were, some very, slight reductions. Looking at FY23, it's a 15 student reduction. Into FY24, it's a 12 student reduction, a 14 student reduction, and a 5 student reduction out to FY26. And then we see things start to turn. I know, it's just, I don't understand that
I
at
don't
all.
have much confidence in those numbers.
Yeah, so what we've typically seen with NASDAQ is that the trend line looks the same, but the magnitude is always different. So it kind of goes the same way, but we usually have maybe 100 more students or something than what is identified here. And I'm just, with all of the construction in both communities, I'm just really surprised by that. So,
It's hard to really even address it, not knowing what they're basing it on.
right,
I don't really
right.
want to have to dive into their numbers, but I think we know.
Maybe there's an
Yeah.
affordability factor here, where as the towns become more expensive to live in, there are fewer people moving in.
I don't think there are fewer people moving.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I
There's
don't
more people
know.
moving in. I wonder if there's more people getting homeschooled or going somewhere not in public schools right now.
Yeah,
I think might be
that
the-
could be,
That
yeah,
could
see,
be it.
I think
yeah,
that
still
might-
seeing
that may be
the
what they're
reaction of
factoring
that.
in.
Yeah, that's a great point, Cindy.
I never
People
think of those things.
who are homeschooling students and
There's a
things
lot.
like that, just waiting
There's
to
a
get
lot.
kind of through this kind of timeframe, so that's an
Yeah,
excellent
and the
point.
question will be, when COVID's over, when COVID
Mm-hmm.
is not the concern anymore, will it come back or will it stay?
Right, right.
But that would only impact actual numbers.
But they may be putting a factor in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're, I'm not sure
Oh,
really
right, they
how
could be
NASDAQ
calculated.
Yeah, they
does.
could be
Mhm.
calculating.
Estimating, yeah.
Just like
Right.
They
what-
might
Based
have
off of
already
They could be
seen
calculated
that.
based on what Raoul
Yeah,
said too,
but
and that.
they may have
it
seen
could all
that
be-
trend the last couple of years and
Yeah,
just
doesn't make sense.
put it forward.
Right,
So who knows?
right. Okay.
I mean, there is a time lag, to react to the changing conditions.
Right.
Yeah, we know historically those numbers get quite a bit less accurate as you get
Right.
out in
Right,
time.
right, we tend to kind of only look at that 5-year view as a gauge, and I would almost call it, well, it's not really flat, but they aren't in the 1% range of changes, and it's just, I don't know, I feel like it'll be something very different that we see next year, so. But for next month, I can have some more information on the distribution between the two communities. Well, it's there. If you look at there's a Hollis view, a Brookline view, and a total. So we have the total, and then if you go back and pull the same data between Hollis and Brookline, but, it's kind of all embedded in there. But-
Does it ever make sense to survey elementary school kids, parents, to see if they're planning on sending their kids to middle school, or middle school, are they gonna send them to the high school? Because there may be some reasons why they would go to a private school.
Yeah,
Sports, for instance.
yeah.
Maybe whatever, special needs, or whatever it might be. I think it's fair to ask the parents, if it's worded appropriately, give us an idea what your plans are so we can do proper planning.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever done that,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
or if we assume a certain percentage.
Well, we did that
of
during
students.
COVID, prior to deciding how we will come back. We did a survey to figure, and we had a set of questions, so maybe we can create a survey for purposes of predicting future enrollment. And the set of questions are different, but it's still, people are used to responding to a survey. And you're gonna have enough responses to make a critical mass. Right?
I think it's more accurate than guessing.
Right. Maybe we can get together and
Certainly.
over some libations, we can create something better.
Who knows what questions we might come up with?
Okay, so I think for now, I'll leave the budget file, and again, we'll have an update prior to the next meeting, but again, if there are any questions or issues that you'd like Kelly to delve into specifically, I'll compile the list and consolidate that, and so that we kind of all have an idea of the questions that are being asked and asked to be responded to. The other document I forwarded to everyone is the calendar of public hearings and dates. So the co-op public hearing date is scheduled for February 2nd, with the snow date of the 3rd, and a March meeting date of 3/15. Hopefully, we don't need 3/16, and then a snow day on 3/17. We can throw that out there. So, and Kelly was kind enough to include the Hollis and Brookline timeframes as well. Brookline is on a slightly different schedule because they're an SB2 community for the school district. And so their deliberative session takes place at around the same time as our public hearing, and then they'll vote on the budget without having a subsequent annual meeting. They'll vote by ballot on March 8th. So I hope everyone can mark those dates in their calendars. That would be fantastic. And
We're going to cruise it.
I mentioned to everyone that the board packet did include some class size information. So if you do have questions about that, please let me know. There was also a great overview on suicide prevention and responses and things like that, that I think it's probably worth, Gina did the presentation of this, watching the meeting, hearing Gina's presentation, but it's a great overview of.
It was actually the guidance.
Guidance did it? Oh, great. Awesome. Oh, and the SAU budget, I also included, the board packet also included that. We had previously talked about it at the last meeting, and I think the change to the SAU budget since we met was the reduction. I think the original view I shared in September had the higher GMR. And then in early October,
yes.
There was a lower, we got the
Yep,
confirmation of the
that's
lower
true.
GMR. So that adjustment was made in the SAU budget, but there were no other changes. And I think, did you take out the copier?
Yes.
And the copier was removed. So some very slight changes. The communication specialist position is still in there, and that information was included in the board packet. So again, if you have an opportunity to review it and have any questions, please let me know, because Brian and I both serve on the SAU budget subcommittee, and we have a meeting scheduled for mid to late November to review the budget another time before it goes to the governing board in December through a public hearing and for voting and things like that.
I did have a quick question about the SAU budget. I noticed that the administrative assistants didn't show any increase in salary.
The assistant to the administrator, the
Yes,
superintendent,
yeah.
that's because it's a new person, and she was
Okay.
hired at a
Okay.
slightly lower
It
salary.
just kind of stuck out as the only one that didn't have
Right,
an increase next to it.
yeah,
Thank you.
And she's only been there a couple of months, right?
right.
Okay. I think one of the things we talked about last month was a legislative update. Nothing is really, I didn't ask Brian to provide that this month. Bills are still in the process of being, LSRs are still in the process of being converted to bills where we see the details of the text language and things like that. So I think it'll be a little bit of, maybe November. There might be time for an update, or December.
Yeah.
So we'll just kind
I'm
of see
not
how
sure.
things, yeah, we'll see how
Yep.
things go.
Mhm.
But we'll definitely keep an eye on a few different things and see what's being brought forward with this next legislative session. So with that, are there any other questions, issues? Is there any other update from school board meeting?
Just Kelly mentioned the parking lot thing, in the past, everybody's been talking about trying to get that lower lot upgraded and maybe using it again. But now with the turf field, the back is
Yeah,
getting crazy, like if there's events. And then a lot of people are parking down in the front of the building, which is fine, but we may need to do some kind of lighting or something. But the original turf field plan, and I would have to pull it out, I think the parking was around 80,000 or something.
Something,
And
yeah.
we ended up taking that out to try to stay within the budget. So they would have to figure out if that area that we originally were thinking to put some parking up there.
Where is that?
It would be when you go into the gate on the corner there.
Right behind the
And then
parking
over
lot
behind
now.
that water
Right behind
reserve,
the
behind the water
okay.
reserve part.
Oh, okay.
So that was brought up, like, do we want to put money into the one down here? And Andy had asked the school board, what some of their high issues were, what we thought would be high for the budget. And the social worker was one thing, because that would help the guidance situation. There's a lot of times, as Darlene was talking about, looking at the presentation, they talked a lot about coordinating different services, and the social worker would be able to do that better because they would have access to outside agencies and things as well. So that we're waiting for a job description because we're not sure, and certification, that was one of the questions we asked, what are we looking at? But we understand Andy's thought as to why that might be an important one. And we're still talking about technology. I mean, with Rich leaving, Rich ran wires. He did a lot. He did a lot in the buildings for the last, so we need to make sure that we have, like Kelly said, that we have somebody, in our pocket basically to help us and help the new person, whomever that is, in whatever position, they, job description that they make for him. Because we all know that Rich did a lot of work that wasn't really probably in his job description when he got here, but he made it there. And the other thing that we got a brief conversation with Andy about was the airflow on the third floor. Because that had been talked about at one point
Right.
before. So he said that may be coming forward, but that was one of the concerns.
We're getting a quote right now for what it would cost to put air conditioning in the building. I mean, that's also part of the energy upgrades, so do you do it first and energy upgrades later, or all together and wait, so there's some questions that we need to address, but we're getting a quote for that right now.
Yeah, that third floor gets really oppressive by the end of June, to say the least. So those were about the four big things that the school board was wanting him to definitely look at putting into the budget and seeing if he could get it work done.
Okay, great.
And yes, if you get a chance to either read through the minutes or watch the presentation, just so that you understand kind of what the guidance office does and what the counselors are facing right now with mental health and some of the issues. It was very well done.
Okay. I just want to,
And this will be in the meeting minutes of the school board.
The presentation may be on the website.
it's posted in the agenda packet.
In the agenda packet, we put it in.
But, if you go to YouTube to watch the meeting, you can see the actual presentation of it.
And hear their explanation, which, doesn't always get completely transcribed. It's kind of hard to do, every word.
Okay, at this point, I normally announce the date for the November meeting, and I can't remember what it is.
Is it the
because-
18th?
Is it the 8th? Did we go with the 3rd?
Third.
I think
Thank
we
you.
did, yeah.
Great, our next meeting is the 18th.
Yep.
And if no one has any other
I
items.
just had a real quick question, follow up on Cindy. For the football field, when you're talking about the lighting, has any discussion been made about the pedestrian lighting
That's what I'm talking about.
between the
coming down.
softball field, that little
Yeah,
paved
down around
area?
that side, because now that the lot's getting overcrowded, people are parking down in the lower, in front of the school and walking on that, so we do need to do something about
Even
some
from the
lighting.
the back parking lot, they're walking up that back path,
Yeah.
with the trees there, so.
Yeah, I actually even looked at, Brian and I had talked about, I even looked at maybe trying to find some solar to put just on the pathway there.
Yeah, Brian had the work lights out there
Yeah.
last game, just to kind of light the path up, because it is pitch black.
But last Friday night, there was a football game and a volleyball game at the same time. And that parking lot was maxed. I mean, there were so many, I saw so many cars in the front. It reminded me of when we used to use the side football field.
Oh,
Because there
wow.
were people, we used to park there
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
And we actually made it to the lot, so when we came down, that area is really dark, especially for, the younger
Sure.
kids to walk, because it's not all high schoolers that come to those
Sure.
games.
So are we happy with the turf field? I mean, is
It's
it working
gorgeous.
out?
It's gorgeous.
Yes.
No, but is it
absolutely.
effective? Are
Oh,
kids happy?
It's getting used,
Yes.
it's getting used all of the time.
And it's also allowing the other fields to take a break
Yes.
here and there too. So.
Excellent.
It's also a great
Boosters used it
community.
for a fundraiser
Yeah,
last
that's
weekend,
right,
right?
yeah, they had the,
Oh,
How did
the
that go,
cornhole,
Tom?
yeah.
not well.
Oh, the weather. No, it was beautiful.
No, I
It
think it
good.
was just too soon
Oh,
to
yeah.
have a, group event like that.
Yeah.
So, and they were questioning the timing just because it had been put off a couple of times for the
Oh,
same
yeah.
reason. So,
Still a great idea.
My
We might consider having
recommendation-
an open house on the field, just to bring people from the towns.
Oh, I would encourage it,
Go to a
anybody
football
that
game.
hasn't been up
Go to a
there.
football game or a soccer game.
Yeah.
or,
Okay.
This
No,
was
I mean, just
fantastic.
look at the schedule and go up there. The Friday night games have been really cool.
It's a big community addition, because not only is it a great field for the kids to play on, but you see entire families coming to the game at night because they're home from work, they have, something to do on Friday night with your kids.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
I was gonna
a
say,
very
really-
different feel, yeah.
It's really nice to hear that it's, busy and crowded and
It is.
getting back to normal
And
and doing
I
like.
think there's a lot
things
of
like that.
community members that are there watching their grandchildren.
Oh,
That might not
yeah.
have come and just stood
Right.
along the
Right.
fence line
Oh,
like
yeah,
they used to.
yeah.
Because this week on Friday night, there was a whole family of like 8 people, and they kept talking about one of the kids like it was a grandchild or something. So I think the community members are probably coming to events now that they didn't come to
Yeah.
before.
You look at that, and, also people whose kids graduated, at several soccer games, we've had friends come
Yeah.
whose kids are out, but they want to come, they still
There's a
watch.
few of us there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So-
it's been great having it this season, especially with all the rain. Because, the games are actually happening, they're not getting
Right,
canceled
right,
because of
that's
games.
true.
But most of the sports are in their last week, and a lot of them are in the finals.
Maybe
right
that
now,
should
so.
make a highlight in the yearbook and the annual budget, document that each town puts out. I
The
think
town
that-
report.
Yeah, there's some great photographs of it too.
The
That
town
one-
report.
That one
Yeah.
drone
Yeah,
shot
town
of the
report.
trees in the background.
Yeah, they've got some really good aerial shots of it.
I don't know.
The thing that I like about it the most is, what I find interesting, and it just draws to me, is all the sides are trees. It's, you don't go to hardly any field that's like that.
Right, that's true.
We're
That's true.
we're sitting there watching the game, and then you're seeing nature like all around. It's just really cool to have all the trees around the field like that. And I think it buffers the sound, so.
Oh.
That's great. Okay, so Cindy, I'll ask for the process observer readout at this point.
It is 8:03. We are ahead of schedule, and we had so little discussion on the comparison of the operating budget versus the superintendent's this year that we're actually getting out 25 minutes early. Very surprising.
Yeah, lots of surprises tonight. Great, so at this point at 8:03, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Brian, seconded by Tom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. See you all in November.
Thank you, Doreen.
Unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you.